Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this morning's workshop, which is around social emotional learning. And in Bauman Wellness's efforts to redefine and expand the definition of wellness beyond the family and individual to the community, institutions, and the planet, we're all in learning mode, and social emotional learning is clearly a critical piece of that learning mode. So we have two wonderful presenters this morning, Christina Wright and Akin Odulate. And I'm just going to give you their LinkedIn soundbite, and they'll introduce themselves and tell you some things that's not in LinkedIn. And of course, I'll put in some of the references in the chat room. But Christina Wright is the founder of wrightarts.co, which really integrates many aspects of her passion, her career, and her avocation as a teacher, as a dramatist, as someone in leadership and coaching, and takes all these things and presents them into wrightarts.co. And Akin Odulate comes from a varied background, studying film at USC, to being a management consultant at some of the big firms. And he has his company, he's the owner of a company called Dawning Systems. And Akin will share some things about himself that's not in LinkedIn. And then they'll proceed to give us two complementary and different perspectives about social emotional learning as it really relates to the larger picture of wellness for all. So Christina, why don't you start and share a couple of things that's not in LinkedIn and a bit of your journey.
Couple of things that's not on LinkedIn. So some people know outside of my faith background and the work that I do in arts education and character and leadership development, is that the dominating passion of my life is baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm San Francisco Giants all the way as a baby of the Bay Area, and so excited that we're just so close to winning the West Division. I'm holding that intention and throwing that out to the universe for the next 2 weeks. So yeah, just some more about my background. I started in the arts. So my academic background is actually in film and theater. And it was right after graduating with my arts degree and kind of thinking about, what does this degree mean for me and what do I want to do with it in my pursuits in the arts as kind of a parallel path. I started doing neighborhood children's virtues classes, and also got involved with a grassroots youth leadership development program called the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. And I started getting involved in the work of character education and youth leadership development, and developed such a passion for that I was like, now I have two passions and two loves and kind of two career paths that I want to go down. How can I merge these together? And what I found is that by using film and theater in particular, but really all areas of the arts, is such a powerful teaching tool to teach character and leadership. So most of my focus has been around the area of utilizing the arts as that tool to work with young ones and just get them thinking about the choices that we make in life and what are the implications of those choices, what is the impact that that's having on the community around us, and how can we continue to grow in our understanding of what it means to make sound, healthy choices. So that's a little about me.
Great, thanks. Wonderful journey. And I'm sure there's many, many adventures ahead of you. What about you, Akin?
I can't follow that, surely.
Well, USC Film School is a good place to start.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, wait. You're not a Dodgers fan, are you?
Oh, no.
Are you a Dodgers fan? Okay, just checking.
Oh, no.
I heard Los Angeles, and I thought, uh-oh.
I was so bad when I moved to Los Angeles, and I was at my apartment, and somebody came rushing in, looked at me and said, "Did the Lakers win?" And I said, "Who are the Lakers?" And they almost revoked my visa.
Your visa from where, Akin?
So yeah, so I'm originally from Nigeria, grew up in England, and I came to the States to go to film school. One thing is not on LinkedIn about me is that I am a big soccer fan, and Arsenal is my team, so we need prayers because it's not doing very well. But it's a London club, so soccer is a real passion for me, and it actually is an integral part of my social emotional learning journey. Soccer was, because that was the one thing in my early years in growing up. I had dyslexia. They didn't know what it was. So I was tagged as, oh, he's just very dumb. but I was really good on the soccer field. And that's where I got my, self-confidence from, because I could always, having a bad time in class, look out into the field and say, I'll settle that when we get out there. So soccer has been a real part of that development. So I went to film school. I didn't, and one thing to be clear, I didn't go to film school to make Hollywood film. I actually went to film school because I wanted to understand why film was such an effective teaching medium. And I wanted to apply it to educational film. I wanted to develop educational film. That was the reason why I went to film school. And I got the bug in films to go to film school while I was sitting at home in London, working on my A levels in mathematics, pure math, which I never finished. I ended up doing other things like history and stuff. But at the time I was doing math, and I was struggling with three-dimensional geometry and partial equations. And then I was watching a show, a documentary on TV called Horizon, and they illustrated on a grid the difference between two-dimensional and three-dimensional. And I'm a visual learner. And it just blew my mind how easy that was to understand. And I was like, and it solved the riddle I had about the partial fractions and the three-dimensional geometry. I could see it. And so I could solve the equations after that. And I realized this is powerful. So that's what led me to, but my journey since then has been in the corporate world, as you're seeing on LinkedIn. And my area of specialty has been transformation and change. And, the linkage between that type of work in the corporate field and social emotional learning is pretty profound. So we'll talk about that later. So anyway, hope I didn't talk too much.
Good. So why don't we get started, Christina, in terms of social emotional learning, what it is, and from your perspective, and then we'll let you and Akin take it away.
All right, sounds good. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right. So yeah, as Johan said, I'm just going to start out with a little bit of an introduction to what social emotional learning is. And then the focus of my talk will be about the implementation of SEL in the classroom. And then Akin will talk more about SEL in the workplace. So just kind of looking at what kind of the standard kind of textbook definition of social emotional learning, it's the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. And we particularly highlighted young people and adults because I know that a lot of times when we tend to think of social emotional learning, we're used to thinking of it as terminology in a classroom, terminology in a school. A lot of school districts and schools are now implementing SEL programs. And so we tend to think of it as a program for young people, but it's really important that we also recognize that it is also for adults, because social emotional learning is a process. It's not something that, oh, I'm going to learn, and then once I learn how to do it, then I've mastered it right after I've learned how to do it. It's actually a lifelong process of learning our social and emotional skills. So this is really, we highlight this as a continuing process that takes practice, it takes courage, it takes a lot of time to really continue to grow in this area. And even as adults, we're still learning it and we're still growing. So just a little bit of history about kind of the origins of social emotional learning. It really actually dates all the way back to the 1960s. In 1968, Dr. James Corner, who was working at Yale University's Child Study Center, he really wanted to develop a program that supported the whole child. So again, recognizing that, yeah, academics is important. We want children to excel in academia and then to go on and have these professions that will impact society. But it isn't enough to just look at academics. There's also other aspects of children, right? We have mental, we have spiritual, we have emotional, we have physical. There's all these different aspects to children. And he wanted to develop a program that supported the whole child. And he ended up kind of launching kind of a series of pilot programs at 2 different schools. And by the 1980s, his work really showed a lot of impact. There was a decline in behavioral challenges by students among those schools, as well as an exceeding in the national average of academic performance. And so this also helped to also create a link between what we would consider the soft skills, the teaching children about their social emotional development, and the link to academia, that when you focus on a child's inner development, you're actually helping them to succeed academically as well. So it's a win-win, and these two are very much connected. Building on that work, in the mid to late 1980s and early 1990s, there was a group of educators that developed the New Haven Social Development Program. They also pioneered SEL strategies across K through 12 classrooms. And one of the founders of that program, Roger P. Weisberg, he connected with Dr. Maurice Elias, and the two of them, along with some other educators and practitioners and child advocates, in 1994 started the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, which is nicknamed CASEL. And CASEL is really the leading organization, considered the leading organization at the forefront of this work of SEL. They're located in Chicago, and they are really a wonderful resource for school districts across the United States and other organizations that are looking for best practices, tips, and strategies for implementing social emotional learning. So CASEL has a model for how they define the areas of social emotional learning, and I wanted to just very briefly touch on these. There's 5 areas. So there's self-awareness, which is the ability to understand one's own emotions, thoughts, and values, and how they influence behavior across contexts. So it's helping a student really be aware of, what am I feeling right now? Okay, am I feeling angry? Am I feeling sad? Helping them to kind of be aware of what they're feeling, and then maybe also why they're feeling that way. Oh, I'm kind of mad because I really wanted that extra piece of cake for dessert. Mom wouldn't let me. Like, just recognizing what's happening and why. And demonstrating values such as honesty and integrity, examining our prejudices and our bias, just being aware of what's happening inside of us. The second is self-management, the ability to make caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. So with self-awareness, I'm becoming aware of what I'm feeling, how and why. With self-management, I'm able to learn how to manage the emotions I'm feeling. Okay, I'm mad I didn't get that extra piece of dessert, but am I throwing a tantrum and acting out, or am I just saying, okay, well, better luck next time. Maybe I'll get 2 pieces of cake tomorrow. Like, how am I actually managing the emotions that I'm feeling? Relationship skills, which is the ability to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships, and to effectively navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. So this is really teaching students how to have effective communication with one another, develop positive relationships, learn how to resolve conflicts peacefully, and learn how to be strong leaders and role models. Social awareness, the ability to understand the perspectives and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and contexts. So that's taking other people's perspectives into consideration. It's showing concern for others, demonstrating empathy and compassion, and recognizing that our lived experiences may not be the lived experiences of all. And I think I was actually scrolling too fast, and I think I did miss one. So there's also responsible decision making, which is the ability to make caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. So that's really helping a student to think about, how do we use the skill of curiosity and open-mindedness to not quickly point fingers or pass judgment? How are we really being responsible for again, our interactions and our communication with others, and being thoughtful with one another, using our critical thinking skills, and promoting personal and community well-being. So what are the benefits that we're seeing of social emotional learning? So after decades of research, there's kind of 4 key areas that have been identified as main benefits. Improvement in students' social and emotional skills, attitudes, relationships, academic performance, and perceptions of classroom and school climate. A decline in students' anxiety, behavior problems, and even substance abuse. Long-term improvements in students' skills, attitudes, pro-social behavior, and academic performance, and also wise financial investment according to cost-benefit research. So again, seeing that link between the soft skills and the academics, the work that we do as individuals in our inner development, and then also the work that we're doing out in the world, and even as we grow, become adults, and enter the work profession. So I wanted to offer a case study of SEL in the classroom, and I wanted to highlight Berkeley's dear neighbor, Oakland. Oakland has been a longstanding partner with CASEL in trying to implement social emotional learning in the classroom. Oakland Unified School District actually started a social emotional learning office. So there's dedicated staff members who work in the SEL office at UCSD that are all focused on implementation and evaluation of programs in Oakland School District. So this dates back to 2009 when they decided that they wanted SEL to be a priority. And it's so interesting when you look at what's happening now because of the pandemic. Schools across the United States are finally putting SEL at the forefront. Even in the state of California, there's actually been money allocated in the state budget to provide school districts with financial resources specifically designated for SEL programming and character education programming, because everyone is finally starting to now see the importance of this program because of the trauma that kids have faced as a result of the pandemic. But Oakland was way ahead of the game. So like way back in 2009, you know, at 2019, I can't do math, like 11 years before the pandemic even started, they were already thinking, yeah, this is important. We see the value of this and we need to place this as a priority. So from 2015 to 2020, they connected with CASEL and they started a project called Pathway to Excellence. And this prioritized SEL as a key lever for shifting the whole organizational structure of the school district. So the district mapped its own SEL standards to the United States Common Core standards to highlight the connection between academics and social emotional learning. They worked with 20 different elementary schools and all of the middle schools in the district. The 3 supported select programs that were chosen by the district were Caring School Community, Expeditionary Learning, and Engaging Schools. And there's also high schools that were integrating SEL into their linked learning structures and practices that focus on work-based learning and career and technical education. So as they were integrating this program, one of the key things that they realized as well is that it isn't enough to just integrate the program and then hope it works, right? There has to be school quality indicators, there have to be evaluators to really assess that the program is working. So they also worked on developing a framework for what this program was going to be, what the outcomes were going to be, and then started creating measurements so that they could start going through and identifying how well the program was working along the way. Oakland is one of 10 California core waiver districts that use SEL school quality indicators to help schools align and prioritize resources and goals for student success. And to date, they've created a network of programs and initiatives and support systems that are all based on these standards. Just to highlight some of the results that the district was seeing as the result of their efforts, looking at suspensions within a 3-year period, suspensions declined from 7.4% to just 3.9%. And the overall graduation rate from the high schools increased from 59.3% to 65.7%. And with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Akin, and he's going to, you're going to screen share, and then he's going to talk to us about SEL in the workplace.
Fantastic. Make sure I've got Back in here. Share my screen. Right. Anybody can hear me and see the screen? Great, super. So I'm going to talk about SEL in the workplace. Let me just start by kind of framing the intersection point in the workplace. So in the corporate arena, where SEL really intersects is primarily in what's called retention. Retention is all about how you keep your employees, incentivize them from leaving, right? Nothing to do with the ones that you let go, but the ones that you want to keep. And the reason that it is such a hot topic, there's two reasons. One is that the equation for success is pretty simple, but it's daunting. You want to hire, quote unquote, acquire the best people, and you want to retain them. So there's that tension constantly going on in the corporate world. Now, in the corporate world, the framing for people, employees, speaks a lot about how the corporate world kind of looks at people. It's called human resources, right? And, you know, when you think about resources, what do corporations do with resources? Well, you know, they exploit them, right? That's what you exploit resources. Even the language in the business school tells you exploit resources in order to be profitable, right? And that's, so you've got that framing. And the other reason why it is a hot topic right now is COVID. COVID has created an environment where corporations are trying to understand what they need to do to keep their people, because there's been a lot of, as they call it in the business, attrition. A lot of people have left, switched jobs, not come back. I had one executive call me into his office, said, I really need some help here. So what's going on? It's like body snatching. The people who came back after COVID, they're not the same. There's a real difference. There's something different going on. And we're trying to understand that so we can know what we need to do to be rewrite by them. So what I want to do is give you a case study. It's a fascinating case study about a project I worked on, still working on, where an organization asked us to help use a technology that's developed by somebody I know to help them with retention. And it's an artificial intelligence type technology. And what it's designed to do is to what they call gamify the retention. And gamify means, you know, trying to make it a game, but it's not a game as in trivial, but a game as in use the dynamics of gaming to make it easier for the corporation to incentivize its people, its key people, to stay or not leave, put it that way. And the key point to understand about this technology is that the way it works is it helps the organization identify the underlying behavioral decisions people make, and then gives them an opportunity to say, this would be a good time for you to influence that decision that's about to be made with X, Y, and Z. And it's been tested and it's been very effective in many, many arenas. And so we were asked to build a version and deploy it for a particular organization to help them keep more people. This is post-COVID. So I'm going to walk you through that story as a case study, and I think it'll be enlightening So let me tell you a story about what technology is discovering about work as it tries to be like workers. That's the best way I could frame it, right? What you're seeing in front of you is this schematic, which represents a set of journeys that employees supposedly take. So you can distill it down to this. In order for this technology to work, it had to understand what is the experience of employees as they go through working in this organization, and kind of distill it down. And that experience broke down to a sequence of performance assessments with work being performed in between, and this was called the preferred path. So a preferred path is somebody joins a company and they come in and they do their work, and then we assess their performance, and they're doing great, so we promote them. And they do more work and they're doing great, so we promote them. And this is the idea. What they're trying to reduce is sometimes people leave, this exit piece. They find a different place to go. And what they were asking us to help them understand, when this stuff is happening, what can they do about it? How can we get to this person over here and incentivize them to move? And this model, as you can see, posits that career advancement is the goal. So COVID comes along and disrupts everything. COVID comes in and it's an unexpected life disruption, and it creates situations where people leave. And what they were trying to do is, how do we get our people back? You know, come back in one way or another. So this was the idea. The technology, based on an algorithm, worked this way. Understanding that the company told us the goal of the employee is career advancement. So the goal of everybody is career advancement. It then plotted what's the preferred path, right? So this is what the data we were getting was telling us. This is how people go through a company. So the employee experience was defined as this. And that there are detours to this experience that they're trying to reduce. This is when people leave. We don't want them to leave. And that the algorithm should help them identify when that's about to happen, and then gives them an opportunity to influence the decision for it not to happen. So the algorithm takes this view and it ingests the path of maybe, say 10,000 employees. Get the data of 10,000 historic present, past and present employees, and how they went through the company. You know, those who left, when they left, where were they in this journey over here? And it then takes all of that information and distills it down to what are the different paths people move through. And the idea was that we would find that everybody kind of moved through this path one way or another, right? And it would distill, well, how, some people went fast, some people went slow. That was the idea, that everyone's doing this. So the algorithm was designed to distill the path. And then some of the, I won't dwell too much on this, but it also, because it can look at how somebody went through the company, it can also assign some values, cost values, and what was the cost of the company of this person's journey through the company and all of that. So it's doing all of that, it's evaluating and putting a valuation on. It's assigning then to every employee's career journey a unique valuation. So it's looked at 10,000 people, it's distilled it down to a set of journeys that people went through. It's saying these journeys cost this much for the company, and then it's saying, and these types of employees they have this value to your company over X amount of time. And then based on that, those values, it says, okay, knowing how much this person's journey is worth to your company, when you get to this point over here, and we indicate that the person is likely to leave at this point, you have a sense of how much you've got to play with in terms of what do you need to do to incentivize them. And remember, this is corporate. Everything is looked at through the lens of, money and values, and how much is it going to cost me to do everything. So that's what they're trying to get to here. Now, how much is it going to cost me? How much do I have in the kitty to say, how much can I spend on this person? And if I can't incentivize them with using this amount of money, then maybe it's okay if they go. Maybe, right? And then the important thing is understanding when to intersect the employee and incentivize them. And it does this by looking at a person's journey like a series of rounds in a game: round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, and that's based on the employee journey through the company. And it's got all this data for 10,000 plus people, and he sees all the different points when they left and all that, and it distills this. These are the rounds. So these are the intersection points where you want to talk to this person and do something that's going to make them more likely to stay. So based on all of this information, the algorithm gives you takes every employee and gives them a evaluation, and then places them where they are in this journey. So that's what it was supposed to do anyway. That's what we expected to do. So here's the curious thing that happened. The algorithm came back and said, there's a different journey that people are going through, and it's not this one. And we looked at the data and was like, well, wait a minute. Oh, the algorithm was telling us that people are going through life experience, and that is what is influencing the decisions as to whether or not most of the time they stay or they leave. It's not this performance stuff. It's they get married, they move away, so they leave. They're married and their life has changed, so they do something else. They have a child, and now so they leave. And it became very clear that the real journey people are going through was this life event journey, and that the goal of the organization needed to be to figure out basically, or what they were asking us to do, how to bring them back into the fold, right? How to bring them back in the fold. So COVID comes along, right? COVID comes along, and COVID makes it pretty clear that the model is flipped. It makes it pretty clear that this is where people are trying to get to. What they want is their work life to support their real life and not the other way around. And so, as this algorithm is designed to identify where you have a chance to influence people and what are the influences you could use, when they started looking at that, guess what type of influences popped up? The company thought, well, it was all going to be about performance stuff and pay and all of that. But no, it's this stuff. This is what influences this journey. The development of healthy identities. I can't work there anymore. It's crushing who I am. I gotta leave, right? I have to check my real self out at the door when I get to work, because I can't be who I am at work. The emotions are killing me. My manager just drives me insane, or whatever, right? The goals, my personal goals and my collective goals, my personal goals, this is not my personal goals. It's not my goal to acquire all this money and that's not my goal. My goal is to do this stuff for my family, do this with my family. That's my goal. This stuff is just an enabler. So you can't incentivize me by offering me all this extra money while crushing my soul and my spirit at the same time. It doesn't add up. My ability to feel and show empathy for others is viewed as weakness in my corporate environment. And that's who I am. I can't live any other way. The establishment of supportive relationships is viewed as it could be a weakness if you get too close to somebody who's on the outs. HR could view it as a threat to the company because they think maybe you want to sue, right? So all of this stuff is happening. And then, of course, making responsible and caring decisions. And that runs straight against the corporate ethos that's maximizing profit. But what happens when I know what we're offering is not what the client needs? Well, go ahead and offer it anyway. Go ahead and sell it anyway. And this is stuff. So this is the stuff that the project and the algorithm was getting back from people. So you want me to stay? Figure out how, if I see that the client needs something different, I don't care if it's the competition that offers it, that I can work with them to help them get what they need, as opposed to sell them something they absolutely don't need. Right? So what really happened with the COVID effect was that the model that I just showed you, the traditional model in corporate said that the number one thing in your life was being effective, how well you did your job. And related to that was how you felt about your job. But how you felt about your job was really a function of how well you did in your job. So that performance assessment, the performance, because your promotions, your pay, your compensation, all that comes out of that. So that was the number one thing. Then secondly, it's how you feel in general, the affective area. How do you feel about your life? Yeah, things are rough, but hey, it's gonna give you a big bonus. That'll make you feel better, right? And the last thing was this life events. Where are you in life? What effect does your job have on your life? And the idea was simply this: listen, we love you to death. We want you to stay, but you're going to have a kid. You're out for how long? I'm not sure if we have a job for you when you come back. I'm not sure if that promotion is going to happen. I'm sorry. Would give you a promotion if you stayed, but, can't give you a promotion if you're out on maternity leave. And that was how. And we've all experienced this, and I know the amount of people in corporate, young ladies who put off having kids because they were affected with the effect on their corporate development and their ability to progress through the corporation through those performance gates. So COVID comes along, and here's what happens. So based on this, they had developed these influencers on the employee journey. They thought, like I said, they thought it was going to be, who do we give a bonus to? How much do we give? What's, it's all monetized. COVID comes along, and what does it do? It does this. Flips the switch, right? And now life events are number one. And the question is, where are you in life, and how does your life make you feel? Now, all of a sudden, COVID comes along, it's an existential threat, and people say, I can't do this work anymore. They can't pay me enough to do this anymore. Who knows? I could get this thing and then gone in like 3 weeks. I'm done. I'm going to spend the time doing the stuff that I really want to do in life. And people start quitting. I shouldn't say quit is not the right word. People start moving on. Because quitting means you could, we could, like something wrong with doing that. No, they just moved on. We're done with that. I'm done with that. The affective domain, how do you feel in general? And how do you feel about your job? Right? How do you feel in general? How do you feel about your job? Of course, like I said, this was the whole thing. Before, when the job was everything, sacrificed a lot of things. And now they were saying, I'm not willing to sacrifice that anymore. And how I feel about my job is that it doesn't work for me. And the last one is, how good is your job? And the valuation of how good the job is had to do more with how well does your job fit your life. The whole thing was flipped. And in coming up with the types of influencers that the algorithm was saying, well, if this is the new script, and if you want to be able to influence people's decision points, what you want to do is hit the sweet spot in the middle here. And in order to do that, like I indicated before, you need to tap into all of these things. So corporates then began to kind of fuddle their way through, like, oh, okay, we've got to figure out how to, okay, let's look at the buzzwords and the things to say. Things like, hey, we're now starting a campaign, bring your whole self to work. We want all of you at work. Well, that whole self, the biggest part of that is this social emotional learning piece. The biggest part of that is, if I'm bringing my whole self to work, work has to be a place where I can develop healthy identities. Work has to be a place where I can manage emotions. Work has to be a place where their personal collective goals are not in competition with life goals. They are actually complementary. Work has to be a place where we feel and show empathy for each other without it seen as a weakness. It's a strength. Work has to be a place where we establish and maintain supportive relationships. Work has to be a place where we make responsible and caring decisions. That's the more important thing. And if the corporate profit goals are in conflict with that, it's the profit goals to change, not this. And so as they started doing that, they started putting these things out. They started talking about work-life balance, corporate responsibility. The Supreme Court even went as far as defining a corporation as a person that can vote, right? And all of these things are now coming back in the corporate field, and people are trying to figure out, what does that mean? Company we were working with the algorithm is trying to understand how to reshape their organization in a way that they can bring more of these things into play. And it's more of a question of what is the future of work. And this is the future of work, because people have decided that they are people, not resources. And organizations are catching up to that. And it'll take a while. The organizations who stick with the, well, it's a resources thing, but the smart ones are already moving in this direction. So that's my presentation.
That's fantastic, Akin. It's funny because I know you well enough, and you know, when you brought the charts out and all that, I said, just be patient, Johan. Just follow Akin's journey, you know. And I know that when you were doing the bottom piece, you know, which is all the traditional performance, carrot, stick, and event incentive, you know, that was the first half of the story. But so thanks very much for using your storytelling skills to share this.
Yeah.
And maybe I'd like to have a conversation between the two of you first, and then we can open it up to everybody else. In terms of Akin, what did you find resonated with you in terms of Christina's social SEL in the educational field, and then Christina, what really resonated with you in terms of what Akin was sharing? So why don't you maybe have a conversation with each other, and then we'll open it up to the group.
Yeah, it was the resonance was very clear and distinct from the project I had worked on. It was like, that's the oxygen in the room that we've been running into. That's exactly it. And the whole idea that the focus was initially social emotional learning was all about helping kids. Well, the truth is, it's those kids who populate our corporations. That's the models that they bring in, and we're finding out that we have to go back and learn this stuff, because without it, we're just not whole. We can't be whole. And people are realizing that it doesn't really matter if you amass tons and tons of money if you're miserable, because COVID comes along and all of a sudden you can't buy your way out of that. It's just the end of the story. And so it really shook people up to the core. And I just, as I looked at the whole slide presentation, I read the self-awareness, the awareness of others. I'm like, wow, this is what in corporate we're calling other things. It's what we're fumbling with, but this is really what it is. This is where we need to go.
Hey, Akin, could you just do me a favor and shut off your screen sharing so that people can see?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry. yeah, I forgot to ask, just. So what I'm hearing is what resonated with you with Christina's presentation is because you have to deal with all the dysfunctional people in the workplace, but she's going to the source.
Yes.
And education, SEL education. Okay, and Christina, what resonated with you in terms of Akin's presentation from your lens?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the notation about no matter how much money you want to pay people as an incentive to stay in the workplace, nobody wants to stay in a workplace that feels like an unhealthy environment. And so kind of connecting exactly what you just said, that like if we're teaching young ones at an early age to develop those cultural, social, emotional skills that they are then going to bring into the workplace when they enter the working world and become the future, leaders of organizations, they're going to be able to create a culture that's an environment that people want to be in and want to thrive in, because kind of like we were saying that there's this connection between soft skills and academics. Again, it's like people want that in the workplace too. They're not just there to academically thrive and make money. They're there to have a social experience. They're there to build relationships with their coworkers, to feel like they're making a contribution and fulfilling their purpose. It's all that part is really important to employees. It's not just about, oh, I want to prove that I can, do this job and make money. That's not what it's all about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, I guess the contrast, the flip side to that is if you manage to create an organization that has a supportive culture with a transcendent goal and everything else, that would be a company that would retain people. So they wouldn't want, even if they could find a job somewhere else that could make more money, they wouldn't want to leave that organization because it's not worth it.
Plus attract people. So the question I'd like to ask to Christina and Akin and then open it up to everybody else is, I've been sort of on a personal journey but you'll see how it connects is, if we say we fundamentally believe in the essential oneness of all of humanity, that we're all connected, that we're all the same, that we have equally, if not more in common, that our differences, and everything is constructed in such a way that we focus on our differences and use that as a way to achieve goals and all that. So this notion of oneness, but sometimes I find it's very abstract. What do you mean by the oneness of humanity? What does it look like in your neighborhood, in your family? What does it look like in the workplace? What does it look like in the classroom? And we can talk about that, but the word that I'm sort of landing on is sort of like a transition is this notion of wholeness. We're all parts of the whole. Even our hosts, even as an individual, there are many parts to my whole being and my whole self or the community. So if we think of this notion of wholeness, either an individual, within the classroom, in the workplace, or in families and all that, and the fundamental fact that we are all parts of the whole, and this whole is infinitely large, what does that look like? Because we have some wonderful people here in participating. I certainly want to open it up to them, but from your perspective, when we think of wholeness, and we think of social emotional learning, right? So think of wholeness, think of social emotional learning, and then we think of this broadening definition of wellness, so in wellness of the individual, the family, the community, the institution, and the planet. How do we, and it becomes, complex, and we use the analogy, complex of like dancing mountains. It's kind of a lot going on. When Grant gave his talk about character, these 21 qualities and how they all intersect, it can be very overwhelming very quickly. So how do we take the metaphor of wholeness, social emotional learning in the journey, and how can we connect people, or what are your thoughts, of using social learning to connect to wholeness as an individual and the community, and to figure out how to live and be more nuanced in all these complexities and all these interactions, because one of the things we said was in character, your strength can be your weakness in the wrong context. Your weakness can be your strength in the right context. That in itself, multiplying it by how many characters is an overwhelming model just to even think about. So what's the role of social emotional learning in helping us navigate and be more sensitive to these complexities and these contexts and these things that are constantly changing? I know that I said a lot in this big thing, but just getting some of your thoughts there, and then we can open it up to everybody else.
I mean, the immediate thing that comes to my mind is the word purpose. that everyone feels that they have a voice and a contribution and a purpose to contribute. So using an example, I mentioned that I have been volunteering with a grassroots youth leadership development program called the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. The foundation of this program is reaching out to middle schoolers roughly between the ages of 11 to 14 and getting them thinking about what are the needs of their neighborhood and how they can arise in service to address the needs of those, to address the needs of the neighborhood. And what's very common for that particular age bracket is that they're stuck in between no longer being a child, but not yet being an adult. And what's hard about being stuck in that middle of the road ground is that they have a desire to mature in age and make a contribution. And yet they're living in a society that tells them, well, just wait until you're older. You're not quite wise enough yet, or you haven't really built that capacity yet. And they're told to just wait. But they don't want to wait. They have all these skills, all these capacities that they want to contribute, but they're told to wait. We also have marginalized communities that are told the people who are making decisions for you are these people over here. And maybe they're more affluent or they're more white or they're more male or whatever, right? But these are the people that are making the decisions, and you can just relax. They've got it taken care of. And there are people who are not given a voice. There are people who are not given an opportunity to contribute. And when an individual doesn't have either feeling a sense of purpose or the ability to express what they feel their purpose is, that is maybe one of the most biggest forms of oppression, is not being able to express your voice and fulfill your purpose. And so I feel like if we can create environments where all individuals are given that opportunity to express that voice, express that purpose, and make a contribution to the betterment of society, that to me is the embracing of oneness.
And what about social emotional learning in that construct, and your experience in these empowerment programs?
Yeah, and I think that the social emotional learning, the 5 areas, those are the skills that the young ones are developing as a way of building their capacity to have that purpose and express that purpose. So I think it's an educational tool that's helping them.
Great. That's wonderful. Akin?
I think that what kind of jumps out to me is that the social emotional learning really presents us with the understanding that empathy is perhaps the most practical building block for a better world than we've understood. The reason why being that the whole fundamental basis of social emotional learning is it's so common to all of us. And it is that fundamental foundational building block. And when we understand how to tap into that and leverage it and use it, all of a sudden otherness reduces. There's nothing more powerful in a charged and a situation where there's tension, and this is something that, that's the way of life in corporate, than having an opportunity to connect with the focus of the tension and connect with them in a way that lets them know that you feel what they're feeling, you connect with them, and it opens this bridge to collaboration that is normally not there. Because all of a sudden you've connected at this feel level, and like you don't have to say a lot of words. You can actually get on with the work. You can actually articulate better what is needed. And it's not just a situation where you're doing something for somebody else. It's a reflection of what you need, right? So that wellness and oneness and all of that comes together. I see the social emotional learning as the glue that helps put that all together, and that practicalizes what we call empathy. It makes it so practical and effective. That's what I'm thinking.
So the last thing, and then we'll open it up, is I'm going to say this one word, and then Akin, I noticed that in People's Lifeway, it's not on your little chart there, but I'm sure it came up, which is the word trauma.
Oh, yeah.
And if we think of these twin processes that are going on in the world today, which is this process of destruction or disintegration and this process of building and construction and integration of a different world, we think of these whole processes. The reality is that whether it's childhood trauma, whether it's trauma from COVID, from climate, from social injustice, from any of these things, trauma is and will continue to be even more so ever present. And one of the things that I immediately saw in your chart, Akin, and I'd like you maybe to talk about that, but is I noticed that in these life events, the one that is present everywhere and no one can plan for is trauma, traumatic events. And so I like the two, and then also with the work that you've done, Christina, and then you've worked in neighborhoods and communities where trauma is the way of life. And so the question is, in your experience or your comments, how is social emotional learning, again, and all these things that we're talking about, dealing with trauma, or how do we integrate trauma as a living and continuing organic part? Because the reality is all of us on the screen right now, in the next half hour, could have a traumatic experience. And that's going to affect everything. So let's talk about social emotional learning and trauma. And what are your reflections on that? Christina or Akin?
The trauma piece is the so what I think that is powerful about social emotional learning is it gives you a framework to extract the wisdom of trauma. It really does, because trauma is like we said, it's a common currency of our world. In fact, if you So I was in film, and one of the powers of film is it's reflective media, right? It reflects on our society, on our experience and our lived experience. That's what it's about. We start having wars and the films all get more and more bloody and gory. We start, all this stuff. And then social media is another medium that is even more reflective. And social media has become, if you ask me, this topography of human trauma. Because when you look at the spectrum of social media, what's going on there, what you see are these eruptions of in reactions to trauma of different types. And you can almost look at it, if we could draw a map of all social media, you could just about map out the human experience in terms of the trauma that people have gone through and how it's reflected in how people express themselves on social media.
I love that quote. Social media is the topography of trauma. Is that what you said?
Yep.
I love that. Remember that. Akin said it here. Social media is the topography of trauma. And so the challenge is, because you use that quote, and we actually had a session, Gabor Mate, about the wisdom of trauma. So how do we take that to it? So Christina, maybe you want to talk about that. And I know we have some questions from our participants. We'll open that up, but talk about trauma and social emotional learning.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing I think of is that social emotional learning teaches people to be proactive instead of reactive, because I think that when we are faced with trauma, trauma is something that can be long lasting. We can go 10 years after a traumatic experience and something will trigger a memory of that trauma. We get triggered a lot by past experiences. And I think that going back to even just the self-awareness or self-management part of the model, if I can be aware of when I'm triggered, why I'm being triggered, and then learn how to manage my emotions in healthy, productive ways, as opposed to lashing out or anger ways, or ways that are not healthy for my well-being, that's a skill that I can build. So I think that for those of us that are going through, and trauma is such a spectrum too, right? I mean, trauma can even just be the daily stressors of life. It doesn't even have to be a specific traumatic event like a death or something like that. That's one spectrum of trauma. And then trauma can just be, I'm struggling in school right now and getting really bad grades, and it's causing me a lot of stress. That can be trauma as well. So I think with whatever trauma we're facing in our life, just the ability to recognize the trauma, the ability to recognize how am I feeling about the trauma, what's triggering, what's coming up for me, what's being present. Also being aware of how the trauma is affecting me physically, because emotions are not just things that we feel. It also manifests in our bodies. We have physical reactions to emotions as well. So just really building that capacity and that skill to be aware of what's happening in my body, what's happening in my heart, what's happening in my head, and how am I responding to what's being thrown at me in the world, because sometimes the world can be hard.
Thank you. Well, we have two good questions in the chat room, and I know Farah had her hand up first, so I'll put her question to the group, to you and Akin, and then also once we ask these two questions, if we'll open it up and people can unmute themselves and chime in the conversation. But Farah's a good question. How do you prove to the big organizations by money how your program will help them? Emotional needs cannot be measured by the big corporations. So I like that one statement, which is, and I think there's probably room for conversation, and maybe Grant or Rima would chime in, but it says emotional needs cannot be measured by the big corporations. And the only reason I raise that is that Grant in a previous workshop actually showed a chart, and this doesn't answer directly, but it says that organizations that are more ethical in their orientation do better financially. So in fact, they've been able to measure by more ethically oriented, or the culture of ethics in public corporations financially do better. But the question is, that was the ethics side, but in terms of emotions, has anybody seen, read or heard anything where that statement, emotional needs cannot be measured by the big corporation? Who wants to Christina, Akin, and anybody else? Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a firm believer that anything can be measured, but you have to be able to define it. And in the corporate world, the definition, basically all definitions are seen through the lens of through the prism of valuation and money. And that, in a sense, is what intersects with how we got involved in that project. Once the corporation recognized that losing people at the rate that they were losing people was going to adversely affect their business and their ability to compete and go forward and do well, it became mission critical to them to do something about it. Now, what they thought they were doing about it, what they thought they were getting into was something different, right? They thought they were going to get into just put some more money down and things will be fine. Tell us how much, What they got was you kind of got to change the whole way you look at these people, not workers, they're people, and how you look, and everything comes down to how you look. So I would say that while a direct measure of emotion by organizations is not, maybe that's difficult or not possible, the indirect measures are very positive. They're very real, and they're very useful. There's a lot of subatomic particles that we can't see. What we measure is their effect, right? And it's the same concept here. We may not be able to measure it, but we can certainly measure the effect, and that's as good as seeing it. Yeah.
Interesting. It's like the wind. You can't see the wind, but you can certainly see the effect of the wind on everything else. We'll go to Grant, because Grant is a psychometrician. So everybody, I'll just say Grant is a psychometrician and industrial psychologist, and certainly has been spending a lot of time reflecting on what you can and cannot measure. Please, Grant.
Well, I'm not going to dive into how do you measure emotion. There probably are ways to do it, but I would imagine that emotional needs vary from individual to individual. But I definitely agree with Akin that you can measure their effects. And in fact, this has been a very keen interest in many industrial psychologists for a long time, going back to the 80s and early 90s. There is what we call organizational citizenship behaviors. So these are behaviors that are like helping behaviors, and they could be as simple as answering your phone on the first ring rather than waiting for just before it goes to voicemail to pick it up, or to help others who aren't asking for help, or just to do things do little extra things for other people, of being service to others in the organization. And of course, there was a big push in that time to see whether or not these organizational citizenship behaviors led to better performance. Okay, and so they found, they did many studies, and then they did a big meta-analysis to summarize all these things. And they found that, this is the first meta-analysis, that organizational citizenship behaviors had a very significant but tiny effect on individual performance. Okay, so IO psychologists jumped to the conclusion that, oh, organizational citizenship behaviors don't matter, right? Okay, so hold on for that a second. But in that paper, they also looked at aggregate performance, in other words, the performance of the organization. And then they found that organizational citizenship behaviors had a larger and very significant impact on organizational performance. So nobody understood that. It doesn't have any effect on individual performance, but it has a huge effect on organizational performance. That must be baloney. And so they just kind of ignored it. So, but it didn't go away. The researchers kept digging and digging until recently, but later, in later 2000s, they did another meta-analysis. And then they found that, yes, that organizational citizenship behavior still impacts organizational performance. And it also affects individual performance. We were wrong on that first meta-analysis. So it's interesting that, yeah, okay, so your boss, let's think about what performance management is. It's a rating from your boss. So he might not value the fact that you helped, Joe Schmo in the next cube, right? And, in the early 80s. And then time moves on. It's like, oh, right, he helped Joe Schmo in the cube. We're all doing better because everybody's helping each other. Now they're valuing these behaviors. So, but all along, organizations that had more of it were outperforming other organizations that didn't have these kind of things. And so these emotional affects, I can't say that they lead to organizational citizenship behaviors, but I would bet that they are one of those effects that are sort of, the weather vane of whether or not emotional needs are being addressed in an organization.
Thank you, Grant. Any other reflections from anybody else in the audience about the question of how do you prove to big organizations by money how your program will help them, or emotional needs cannot be measured by big corporations? I just open up to the floor. Anybody have any other reflections on that? Then otherwise we'll move to the next question. Rima, you always have something thoughtful to contribute.
Well, I'm kind of glad that we have this discussion, especially between the Grant and Akin, and that corporations are actually looking at it, which is amazing to me that they finally come to that point. But it's still they're looking from the competition point of view. And I know that I have been involved in corporations where you have two competing teams, two teams, same organization, one in Germany, one in the United States, working on the same project and see who will get there first. So that's not even to talk about unhealthy environment. So I'm glad that the data is actually right now showing. So it will be interesting how corporation will be taking that and implementing or switching it for sure. But I see actually what Grant is doing, and with the social emotional learning kind of coming together and helping people to discover who they are on their life and spiritual journey. Because some of the things on the character assessment, it's not always in your prefrontal cortex that you can say, yeah, this is who I am and this is how I behave and those are my weaknesses, or I need to work on this. But with the social emotional learning, kind of they in my mind fit together. So I'm amazed. This is for me, food for my brain, for my thought, and I'm glad that we have this kind of the discussion. It's beautiful.
Any other reflections from the participants? Otherwise, we'll go on to the next question about emotional needs of big corporations. No, I didn't say that. Emotional needs measured by big corporations. Unfortunately. Yeah. Anyway, so Chris, yeah.
I kind of second what Arima just said, which is I never knew that this would even be a mainstream consideration. I've always seen it as sort of a fringe ideal and a fringe benefit, even though it is absolutely obvious that it's very important, but that it hasn't been prioritized. So I'm really glad to see that there's a shift. And it's interesting that COVID has brought that about. You don't hear that in the news so much when they're analyzing why there's a workers aren't going back to their jobs, or why there's a worker shortage and all of that. They don't talk about it as much, but it makes perfect sense. So thank you. This is fascinating.
It is fascinating. So I had a thought, maybe all of these kids who are SEL trained enter the corporate world right now. They're valuing something else. So all of the millennials, we know they are different. They behave different. They want the different things. So for them, corporation has to do a little bit more to satisfy and to buy, their effectiveness, how effective in the job and the relationship. So maybe that's what happened.
So we have another question from Selena, and correct me if I'm wrong, Selena. I also think you also have a background in, is it arts education? Is that right? Or am I thinking of something else?
No, I am an art educator. Yes.
Yeah, arts education. Okay, good. So your question, which makes sense, which is, what is the thought on this being a direct reaction to the removal of arts from our public schools? That was your question. Maybe you can just contextualize that question a little more, Selena.
So I've worked in various demographics, but I've worked in an alternative school where I was able to use art therapy to kind of help these students who were at a crossroads, use their emotion, learn how to, just SEL. I was able to do that. The school district since COVID has implemented that, but I'm just wondering what anyone else's thoughts are on maybe not every student in school having access to that artistic side of their brain, be it music or the arts, the visual arts, and not being able to self-express or, just really put their own emotional stamp on the way that they feel if they can't self-express verbally. And how that might be a direct correlation to what we're seeing in the workforce right now, because this is something that has been kind of phasing out for many years now, to where art teachers are just working part-time, or music teachers, or some schools don't even have those outlets anymore, unfortunately. So I feel like now we're starting to see generations that were impacted by that choice in the workforce. And I'm just wondering if anyone has any thoughts on maybe if that is a trail to follow, or what thoughts are on that.
So just, Selena, maybe I think I understand what you're saying, but maybe the question is that how can you do SEL with less investment of the arts in the public school system, right? Can you do SEL where there's not a lot of direct funding, a lot of direct intentionality around arts programs in the school? What does that look like? And especially with COVID too. So either Christina or Akin, or even Grant.
That question made me think of something, an experience that I had, and with a new employee who's working for me on a project, and just outstanding. She came in from a very top university. She was brilliant at her work. I noticed that straight away. I worked with her to get her into projects that touched the sweet spot that she really liked. She didn't even know that she was, I call her a data hawk. She had an affinity for data, and she didn't even know that was such a thing. And I was able to say to her, I think you need to go in this direction, because you get so much pleasure out of that. First thing that struck me about that was that she didn't know. She didn't know herself. She didn't know enough to say, oh, this is where I am. Just in my conversation, just a line item on her resume, and we talked, and I explored that more and more, and it turns out it's this big thing in her life, and she didn't. So she goes and she gets great feedback. I'm getting messages every 2 weeks from president of a company saying, that lady is turning this project around. I can't believe it. I got a direct note from one of the companies, and this was a bank, a credit card company that data is what they do. And he wrote me this note. He said, there were some very complex data sets that we put together, and she just very quickly figured out how to rationalize it and make it work for us. And I haven't seen that kind of skill set in a lot of people. I certainly haven't seen it in someone as young as her. So she is doing gangbusters, right? She's doing really well. But I noticed that for how good she is and what she was doing, she was kind of blind as to who she was, kind of a thing, right? There was that side of it. So when the pandemic hit, I called her up and I said, this is not a work call. This is a social call, just checking in to see how you're doing, right? So she's home now, right? And she just burst into tears. Now, I've just gotten an email back from the CEO of a company saying she's amazing. And she's gotten all these, and she is bawling her eyes out. And when she calms down, I ask her what's going on. I had a sense. I said, first of all, tell me, what's it like for you being home? So she lives in a studio apartment. She's got her kitchen, her bedroom, her work desk. Before COVID, she's off at the client site. She's at a hotel somewhere, and she's doing this stuff. She comes back to the hotel room, and now after COVID, the point is, she didn't understand the linkage between those two. And I asked her if she had any form of art that she liked. Is there any? And she, well, I kind of like drawing, but, I haven't really. And so this conversation, the point I'm trying to make is this. Perhaps the one place where we begin to experience the linkage, the social emotional learning linkage, is in and through the arts. And when we're not being exposed to that as we develop and grow, we get a situation where we have, quote unquote, the ace employee who is on the fast track to burnout. And there is no coming back from, we're talking about trauma, right? There's no coming back. And when I contacted the HR on her behalf and worked out a deal whereby they paid to put her in a new apartment, made sure it had enough rooms where she could have one room for the office. Then we talked about there's some things you need to do. First of all, you need to tap back into the art. Figure out, find a social group online that's doing what you're doing and start doing something. Second, your environment is really important, and moving your furniture around every 3 months might, so stuff like that, so that you don't come into the same space all the time. So she's sitting there and she's thinking, wow, I never even thought all this stuff was related, but it is. And the earliest doorway that I know of is through the arts. And when we take that out of the schools and tell people we're going to focus on STEM, because that's the big deal, that's the big ticket item, what you're doing is you're creating people like her. And you're putting them out there, and they don't succeed, not because they're not good enough, but because they're not balanced enough. And it touches on the piece about the value of measuring emotional value, right? Right. So she's a rock star of the company, and she was going to last maybe 18 months, and then she'd be done. So that's costing them. That's a piece of their, and they could see that. They could see, oh my God, if she's no, we need to do something about this. And the question they then had was whether or not this was a one-off because she's a star, or whether this should be a principle of a policy that is applied to all of their employees. And of course, I was saying to them, you need to think about this for all the employees, because she is a person. They're all people. She's not a rock star. She's just a person. And we're all like that. So I connect with you on that. Absolutely. I think it's going to come back. I think we're going to see it. I think we're going to realize that we can't have balanced people without using the arts.
Christina, any reflections?
Well, and even an example that comes to my mind when you say all of that, Akin, is I think of Thomas Edison, who created the light bulb. I can't for the life of me believe he was just using the left side of his brain and tapping into scientific inquiry. The guy was creative. It's
Oh,
creative to create something like that. He was also using the right side of his brain because he was using creativity. And I think that, again, like sometimes we have a stigma in our minds of what does it mean? What do we mean when we mean arts, or what do we mean when we mean artist? But everyone has the inherent ability to be creative.
Yeah.
And kind of another way that you can even describe the arts is creative expression. And again, this goes back to everyone having that innate desire to express, to fulfill their purpose. Creativity is all a part of that. And creativity, as we know, leads to innovation. And so if we're talking about the wellness of workplace, there has to be creativity in the workplace. There has to be that tapping into the right side of the brain in the workplace. And I think the arts is a process with which creativity comes out. Your inner artist comes out to play, and you express yourself creatively. And creativity is just a byproduct and a result of engagement through the process of the arts. And there's a lot of evidence-based research that really shows how the arts, again, just enhances our inner development. I mean, not only does it bring out creativity, it lowers rates of depression. So anyway, there's all these evidence-based studies that show the innate benefits of the arts for inner development and creative expression. And I do find it unfortunate that, kind of like SEL has kind of taken a back seat to academics in the classroom, arts has also taken a backseat to other academic areas, because you've got your science, history, math, and English, which are the 4 core areas that every school must offer. And then even competing with like sports or other areas of academic learning, the arts is heavily underfunded, traditionally, and heavily underfunded. And not all schools offer art. There are actually students in schools across the United States that have no access to art programming. And it's a shame, because I mean, again, the data and the statistics are there. I absolutely agree with Selena that I don't know how you can possibly leave the arts out, because it's such an integral part of the process.
I have to share the story from like beginning of 90s when my son enrolled in like 6th grade, and they defund the art program. So I had to, ask privately, actually take him to the art teacher and stuff. And I was complaining to the principal, and principal said, well, do you want him to learn the skills on the computer, or you want him to play the violin? I said, at that point in time, well, you're asking me, do I like my left or right side of my brain more? And that is totally mute question. But yeah, that is the mentality that it is, and art is important, needs to come back. I'm hoping that these kind of discussions are amazing. I think this is where that integration happens. This is where we will create a new world, or at least a movement towards the new world. Maybe some of us will not see it in our lifetime, but at least we can start the process, which is a beautiful thing. Thank you, guys. Oh, Johan, thank you for bringing these wonderful people together so we can see how this whole fit in the much larger image of the wellness. This is where it is. It's beautiful.
I want to formally thank Akin and Christina for presenting a wonderful workshop about social emotional learning. And I want to thank all the participants, Grant, Arima, Selena, for really asking good questions, and Farah, and being part of the conversation.